Will Middleton took on the challenge of building a sustainable fashion brand that combines fashion, community, and expression to encourage the conversations around mental health after the untimely death of his younger brother to mental illness. Their products are made with 100% organic cotton, and they provide funding to plant a tree for every item they sell. 10% of their profits go to the mental health charity YoungMinds, and you can find them on Instagram and TikTok at H Clothing. This conversation spans a lot of important and emotional topics. I really hope you enjoy hearing more about Will's story. Well, welcome to the third episode of Never Fully Heard. Thank you for coming on.
Hey Nick, thank you so much for having me on this. I'm excited. I'm glad that I'm the third guest. Hopefully the first two guests, won't outshine me, but I'm excited about our conversation today.
For sure. Where I like to start is basically the term mental health is used a lot in campaigns. It's said a lot in public, and I feel everyone's got the understanding that it needs to be a topic that's addressed, but it's a term that can mean so many different things to different people, depending on their experiences, depending on who you're speaking to, like so many different factors. So I guess what does mental health mean to you?
Yeah, I think that's the thing with mental health, isn't it? It can be such a kind of complicated topic, and it has so many meanings behind it. I mean, for me, there's obviously the kind of dictionary definition, which is all about, you know, how it's the measure of how efficient our emotional, social, and cognitive skills all work together, and making sure we have that sort of harmonious relationship between our mind and our body. But I guess in terms of more of a human answer, and something that I sort of believe, is that it's the combination of everything that we think about, that we feel and do in life. Because when our mental health is neglected, it can impact every aspect of our life. And there's also a big misconception that mental health means mental illness, and you can have good mental health but still be in very bad mental states at times. So it's basically the acceptance of fluctuations in our our emotions, our feelings, our thoughts, but being able to manage and control them, and control how they affect your life. So it's something that we always have to tend to, like a garden, which was very much the inspiration behind one of the designs on my clothes, and something that you need to nurture and you need to look after, and that that can't be left behind.
I think that's a really good classification to make, that mental illness is different from mental health, because mental health can very much be just your like not sleeping very well, and that's impacting your day-to-day mood. But then there are medical conditions which may need to be addressed through more serious treatment. Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And I want to dive into what's your journey been with mental health to date.
Yeah, so I guess I've had kind of quite a roller coaster of a ride. I think for me, my first probably about 18 years of my life, I hadn't actually really thought about mental health. And the reason why is because I have been fortunate enough to always have reasonably good mental health. And so as a teenager, as a kid, all I knew was my own experience. And therefore, because I wasn't taught it or told about it, I just thought everyone else felt like me, and that everyone else went through life in the same way that I would. And that apart from a couple of bad days and feeling a bit down, in general I was in a pretty good place. And so so up until about leaving school, I hadn't really thought about it. And then the time it started to change was when my younger brother at the time, who was 5 years younger than me, so he was about 13, he had started to experience mental illness, and it kind of got worse and worse throughout his childhood. And I began to myself and my family began to experience it secondhand through him. And that's when I really started to, understand and realize more about what mental health, but also mental illness was. But even saying that was probably my awareness began at sort of late teens, but I don't think I actually began to understand fully, everything around it until I was probably in my early to mid 20s. And actually, only because of taking on this brand and, working a lot in mental health and doing a lot of training in it, have I just, I think my curve of understanding has just, massively gone up. And, it's something that I think you learn throughout your life. There's no end goal with mental health. There's no end goal with, being able to understand it to the max. It's something that you experience through your own life, but also constantly can read about, and that, even professionals and academics are constantly finding new things out about it. So yeah, it was quite kind of stable and steady up until I was a bit older, and then it's kind of a lot of it's been lived through my younger brother.
And do you mind just saying a bit more about how that impacted you? The I guess the secondhand impact of seeing someone go through something impacted you.
Yeah, so I think at first because so I was a family of six, and the five of us, so excluding my brother, also, none of us had mental illnesses and we didn't really know much about mental health. So I think for us, it was very foreign and it became quite difficult to understand what he was going through. And it was only when professionals would tell us what was happening that we really um, became aware of what was going on. And so, because of his moods and his behavior and his emotions as a result of the mental illnesses, it became very hard to deal with, um, particularly at home, because we still were battling with this idea that, well, all of us are fine. And in a very kind of, I hate to say it now, but it's something I've obviously learned is not the right thing to say or think. He's grown up the same way we have. He has the same, he has a very stable life. He has a good life. Why is this happening? Why is he feeling like this? Why is he acting like this? And I think that obviously became less of a thought as time went on, but it definitely was something that we all were guilty of thinking. And I say guilty. I don't think it's a wrong thing to think that. I think it's just purely ignorance. And I think a lot of people are in that position, but it's all about obviously learning and getting a better understanding of people who do have a mental illness and bridging that gap between those that do and don't. And that's a big thing around my brand and what I'm trying to do. And so I think my parents tried to protect us kids from it, particularly because they knew that it was a very difficult thing to deal with, and they didn't want us, getting upset by it or getting too involved. But regardless of that, it was still something. I was still quite close with him, and we spoke about it a lot. And I did really want to learn more and more about how he was feeling and why he was feeling that way, and what helped and what didn't. And that was something that's obviously massively helped me to then, with friends and people around me, to be able to say and do the right thing. And it's something that really piqued my interest, particularly after his untimely passing. Was something that I just wanted to make a conscious effort to really understand more about, and to know that if I'm someone that's never experienced a mental illness, that doesn't mean that I can't understand it better and that I can't speak on the same page or from the same hymn book as someone with a mental illness. I think that is such an important thing, because that's where the fear comes from people who are ill. They think, I don't want to say anything because not only will they not understand, but there's the stigma behind it and there's the kind of labeling. And so it was obviously, there were a lot of not so nice times with it, and it was horrible to see him going through that. But sadly, it's one of those things that, the tragic irony of, because of what happened, it's now allowed me as well as the rest of my family to be that much better equipped, and you know now go through life in a way that is a lot more empathetic and understanding of someone who might be in his position. So yeah, it was definitely an up and down time throughout his childhood for him particularly, but also for our lives. And yeah, that was, as I said, that was the trigger that kind of got me to start this whole mental health fashion brand.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I think it's going to be really powerful for people listening that have someone they know going through it, or maybe it's even a friend that's going through it, that they've got a sibling, family member that are going through the stage of mental illness, or maybe like an addiction problem. Um, I'm guessing it must have been quite hard for your friends during that time to know
Yeah.
what to say, and how to kind of communicate with you. Is there any advice you can give for people that may know someone who's going through it? Best of, like, how do you wish you could have been supported by friends in that time, or family?
Well, what's interesting is we kept it quite private, and I think that's also quite a common thing for families, because everyone has this perception of, you know, the way people are, the way a family might be on the outside. And not many people, not even some of our closest friends, really knew what was going on and that he was ill. And it's only since his passing that we've really begun to speak about it. And I don't, again, the word guilt comes up, because it was like there was almost like a shame to it. It was this thing of, you know, we don't want to admit that our brother, our son, is ill, because one, that will start conversations, it will get questions going, and and he's already dealing with enough. He doesn't need that added pressure and that added, gossiping, as it were. So we kept it very private, and as a result, I just kind of it was just mostly the family that had supported each other. There were obviously times I did bring up at a surface level to my friends, and I think I'm very lucky where I've had a very, very good group of friends since a young age. And when I went to university, that only grew, and still now we're all very close, and we've all been very supportive of each other in all areas of our life. And so when I would bring it up, they would, always want to talk about it and see, and see if they could offer any advice. But the problem was is that I don't, as far as I was aware, none of them were going through something like that. None of them had brothers or sisters that were going through something similar, or at least very few were. So then it became a case of, we're here to listen, but we can't really help you or tell you, what to do or how to make the situation better. So as I said, it just kind of fell back to just the five of us having to try, and particularly my parents having to do as much as we could to make it better. But even that didn't work. And that's why we ended up having to kind of really seek out professional help. So, and I think that's where again, there's a barrier, is that so many people aren't taught about, the right things to say, and um, advice to give, because if you don't experience it yourself, or you haven't been to therapy, or you haven't been told, or haven't been, from a young age, then you're, not to your own fault, but you're not going to know really what to say. And I think for a lot of people, they just think, should I even bother mentioning it if I know I'm not going to get much back? And so I think in terms of advice, if I was where I was today, and let's say one of my friends came to me with the same issue in his, sorry, I don't use the word issue, the same example in his family, then I think I would want to say that, like, I'm always here to listen, and beyond that, someone like me, I can kind of give advice as to, like, the way he's behaving, what it might be, what the kind of best next option might be, based on, or the best next step based on what we did with my brother. And just to be an open book, and to know that whenever they want to talk about it, that you're there. Because I think when you do have something difficult to bring up, it's not often you're going to want to turn to someone to talk about it. So when you do, or when someone does come to you and talk about it, it's always good to just, no matter what situation you're in, even if you're out or whatever, to not turn away and just say, look, this isn't the best time, can we talk about this later? To always try and be open with it, because you don't know how long it will be until the next time they talk about it. And particularly with regarding someone who is mentally ill themselves, if they want to open up about it, I think that massively expands to that group, to those people as well, because you don't know, it might be once in a year that they talk to someone, and if that person shuts them down because it's not the right time, that could be a tipping point. And so I think that's always something that I'm really cognizant of, and that I always, particularly around friends and family, that I want to be sort of not known for, but know that, I'm there whenever they want to talk. And I think a lot of my friends, would probably say the same about themselves.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really good thing to do, because I think what I've done is sometimes I may not know what to say, but I've just said, look, I may not even have anything to say after you speak about it, but I'm just going to be here to listen, and
Yeah,
just say it out loud. 'Cause I think a lot of people's
completely.
thoughts they have in their head, they just never said out loud. And if you haven't been to therapy, it's a good starting point, just to use the muscle to say those emotions. When you were in
Yeah,
some of
exactly.
your when you were in some of your lowest moments, how did you kind of help your mental state? How did you manage that period?
So I think I've definitely gotten better at dealing with it. I think in the past, I was actually quite sort of insular about it all. I think if I was going through something tough, um, and I wasn't in a great place, I just felt like I had to deal with it by myself. And that's not for any reason. That's not because, my family didn't give me enough attention or whatever, anything like that. It's not as a result of anything, bad. But I just had a mentality with myself to just get on with it. And I think I probably had that mentality because I knew that it would only ever be short lived, and that I could get through it, and that it was never truly that bad. I'm trying to think of a few occasions. some of them regarding my brother, when it got really bad, and it did definitely affect me. And I remember getting a call from my mum once at university, and something had happened, and it just really got me down. And I remember my girlfriend at the time, we talked about it a little bit, and I got a bit upset. But then it was that thing of, right, I've got upset, I've talked about it, now I can move on. And so I think, but in other occasions, it was just, just you just got to fill your time, you just got to crack on, whatever you've got to do, study, work, whatever it might be. And I don't know if I necessarily had the best sort of pillars of, um, you know, good mental well-being in place at times. I think, as a kid or as a young person, you can be quite impulsive, and if you're sad, you might want to drink or go out, or just surround yourself with friends and have fun, and that's fine if your coping mechanism is just to surround yourself with people and put a brave face on. But that's obviously what bottling up is, isn't it? It's that thing of you're pushing it down until the next time something happens. And I think I've become a big believer, and obviously try and enforce it with myself and others, to not let something get too deep, or not bottle up something and just talk about it then and there, because I think that reflects in all aspects of our life, relationships with people, whether it's partners, family, friends. If you don't say something the first time, because it may not seem like a big deal, it can sometimes get worse and worse. So it's definitely something, as I said, I've got better at. And again, that is because I've just started to read a lot more about it, listen to podcasts about it, and study it basically, and enforce it on myself, and have routines in place and pillars in place to make sure that I can fall back to those, and that my coping mechanisms aren't negative things. They're not drink, or they're not bad food, or whatever it might be. I've got to, making sure that I've got a good grounding. So yeah, that's really important to me nowadays.
And on some of those moments where you did speak up, what were the because I think it's speaking to my friends that don't have any haven't had any real issues with their mental health, or haven't had too many low points that they've spoken about. What were some of the things you kind of brought up to your friends? Was it just a case of, oh, I'm feeling really down today, or what were some of the topics that you kind of broached with your friends or family?
Um, I think it would normally be. I wasn't someone to kind of just say I'm feeling down. I think it would always be a reason. There would always be a kind of, this has happened and I feel like this. I mean, obviously, the biggest one in my life has obviously been going through grief, but grief's a bit different, because grief is obviously something you only go through as a, it's happenstance. It result as a result of passing of a loved one, and you're not born with grief or anything. It's not like a mental illness. It can obviously cause mental illnesses, but it's something that is, once it's happened, it may stay with you for the rest of your life, but obviously you learn to manage it and deal with it better. And so that was probably the biggest thing that I would bring up. But obviously, because that is such a serious thing, friends and whoever would always straight away, be asking and wanting to make sure I was okay, regardless of the fact that they may not understand. Um, but in terms of other situations where it was something else, work or relationship or whatever it might be, where things were getting me down, I think, yeah, it was just a case of, particularly among I think among guys, it was a case of just saying it, oh, I'm feeling a bit shit because I had a massive argument with my mum, and you explain it, and they go, oh, and you talk through it, and then you move on. And I think, that's obviously, particularly on men, it's that thing of get it out, say it, and move on. Whereas I think if I was to turn to one of my female friends and talk about it, it probably becomes more of a, how are you feeling about that? And it's a back and forth for a bit longer. And it's a, let's talk about this for a bit more. And that's not to say at all that my male friends aren't, good people or good at talking about things. Obviously that, there are times when they are very good at it. But I think what I'm referring to is, particularly in a group and stuff, that becomes a little bit harder. And I don't think there's any one person I would always necessarily go to if I had something I wanted to talk about, or a reason why I was really down. I think you kind of have different friends for different things, in a way that, that some are better than others at responding to. At least that's the case for me. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of think about, you know, who you go to, and, whether it's male or female, or a particular person, based on what you're going through. And I'm sure, I imagine you've probably felt the same.
I think the group situation is it's a real tough one to kind of come to terms with. It's actually interesting. So there's an interview with Barack Obama where he's like, even he was speaking about it. So he was like, my wife Michelle can go to like lunch with her friends, and they're speaking about who broke up with who, how they're feeling, if they're feeling down, if they're feeling like happy, all these emotions. And then I can have my friends over, and she asks me what's going on in their lives, and all I can tell you is the basketball score. And I think it's that the difference between how
Yeah,
certain like guy groups interact. It's very, especially in like the UK, it's very much like banter driven. Like it's very much like, how can we have as much laughs, and that's great, but there is a real reluctance to
yeah,
come out with anything emotional. And the amount of guys that have guy mates I have, that it's after like a few pints, it's in the corner of a pub, they've mentioned something really serious that's going on, or it's over WhatsApp, or like late at night. It's only when it gets to a really bad situation, and instead of like labeling it in the moment,
yeah.
it gets to a really bad stage. And yeah, have you got any thoughts on what the I guess what the stigma is?
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you said is really valid, and that Barack Obama example is pretty accurate. And I also just think I think that's what it is. Men, when they come together, want to talk about things. They want to talk about like sports. They want to talk about, you know, funny stories and just be silly with each other. Whereas women will naturally more likely talk about people. And there's not a bad thing or a good thing about it. It's not right or wrong. It's just the way we kind of which way we lean towards. I mean, the whole stigma behind men and talking about their mental health and opening up is obviously a big topic and something that can get quite deep. And I kind of have two responses on it, because one of them is more to do with like what I've seen maybe on social media and people that I've spoken to, and it's probably a bit more of I don't want to say extreme, but probably a little bit more of a sort of negative spin on it. And then one is more to do with my own experience and probably relates more to what you just said. So part of the reason men struggle to open up is because for so many men to be a man, and this stems back to just humans and in history, we as men almost feel like we're never good enough, and that we're supposed to be these providers, these upholders. You're meant to have the good job, you're meant to be the good dad, but more importantly, your mental health is meant to be fine at all times. And we don't tend to open up about our problems because I think deep down, a lot of men don't think anyone really cares. You're just expected to get on with it, and therefore we think, why bother bringing it up in the first place? And that links back to, as I said, the stigma that's been embedded in our society as far as we can remember. And if you show weakness, you show your emotions, and you aren't able to provide to be this kind of stereotype of a man, then you feel worthless. And a lot of guys still feel like that today. They if they don't have those kind of boxes ticked, then they feel like they are a failure in life, and that's almost embedded in our DNA. And that's why this whole movement with obviously trying to get men to open up more and trying to move the needle, it's going to take longer than sort of the last 10 or 20 years that it's been happening, because so many men out there still very much hooked on the idea that they've got to reach these expectations and that they've just got to crack on when life gets tough. Now that is quite a direct view, and as I said, I massively empathize with it, but I don't necessarily agree that that's the attitude we should take. For me, and as I said, this is because of more my experience. It is, there has been an attitude that guys aren't able to open up as well. And I think that is because when we meet up, we want to be silly and not bring people down and stuff. And therefore the environment we're in tends not to be conducive to talking about your feelings. But I also think that we are afraid to be vulnerable. And I think we're scared to admit that we're not okay, or that we're sad, or whatever it might be, because we don't like the idea that that could have a response of potentially being taken the piss out of, being seen as less of a man. And I think vulnerability has become such a big sort of such a key word in the mental health space, particularly among men, because to compare directly to women are more able to feel vulnerable. They're better at talking about their emotions. They're more comfortable saying that I'm not feeling good, and talk about it and work through it. And I think, you know, we don't now live in a world where it is just all about the male bravado and how they lead everything. You know, there are so many parts of society where that's not the case, and it's okay not to be the case. And even with families and men not being the breadwinners and staying at home and whatever it might be. And so it is becoming more accepting, and that in itself is hopefully encouraging more men. And I think it is to open up and you know, and it is that thing of bringing out our feminine side. And I know there'll be people out there who would argue with even making that statement, because that suggests, you know, the whole sexist thing of like, it's either woman or man. You've got to be more like a woman or you've got to be less like a man. It's not, you know, I don't want to simplify it like that, but we are obviously always going to make a comparison to people that, you know, the other half of the coin of, to women who are just better at opening up. And so, as I said, we are moving in the right direction, but I just don't think it's something that's going to be fixed within years. I think it's something that, you know, we need to like almost remove from our DNA and then kind of create like a new way of, you know, when a guy grows up, you know, he needs to have the men above him encouraging him to speak up and stuff, his teachers, his whatever, anyone around him, and not having those stereotypes kind of thrown at him from a young age. And I'm sure that's happening a bit in, you know, for young people in schools and stuff all over the country, but I'm sure there's also still a way to go. And I've seen it, you know, through doing talks at schools and stuff and other bits. And, you know, I've got a younger sister, that there is still the case of, you know, the guys are meant to be the sort of strong, tough ones, almost like the bully type, like, look, you know, don't show emotion. And then and then when they grow up, it's that thing of like, they realize, you know, that's actually really detrimental, and that's not the only way to be. So yeah, I mean, it's, as I said, we could obviously go on, and I don't want to, but that's kind of my I guess my overarching thoughts on it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. There's so many different things I want to kind of pull up on that. I think that is the first bit. I think even though it's a strong point of view, I think I've definitely felt it multiple times in my life. Like when I originally went through kind of mental health issues the first time, like depression and anxiety,
Yeah,
like no one else around me would have known. And I didn't want to speak to my girlfriend about it because I was like, she's going to see me as like a weak person. Like if I have to go through therapy and I have to go through this period where I'm not mentally like as mentally present to the relationship, she might dump me. She might not want to be with me. She might find someone who's like hasn't got these mental issues, and all those insecurities started
yeah,
manifesting. So I was like, if I just like try and my ways of fixing it, which are actually still ways I manage my mental health, which is just trying to do as many like gym sessions as possible and trying to basically leave no time in between, no space for me to even think about it, and just try and work
yeah,
as hard as I could. And I thought that was going to solve it and I could just be strong. But then it got to the point where um, it was just unmanageable. It was starting to manifest in like physical reactions, just like anxiety. I couldn't concentrate. And however strong you may think you are, like physically, I think, yeah, it's a phrase like the mind has the ultimate tactical advantage over you. You can try and fool it however you want,
right,
but ultimately it knows all your weaknesses. So it's gonna just keep playing on
yeah,
those. And I think for me, it's
yeah. No, I think that's well said.
I think there's a lot of people that w- just talking will never be the solution. There's a lot of guys that just talking about their feelings is never going to be the solution. But I think there is a world in which there can be more group situations where, as you said, people are trained to be able to. Because it's quite a lot. If I came up to you and or a friend and went, I can't stop overthinking. I'm like literally overthinking every single thing. Um, I'm insecure about this. It's like you may not be prepared to deal with that. So I think it's being able
Yeah,
to
would you say?
just hold the space for people. And I think maybe it's just that naturally men haven't had those innate skills developed in them as much. But maybe it's just something with like as you're doing talks at school, these podcasts. It's just teach people how to hold the space when they're um, having those emotions. But yeah, I think there's no one way to solve it. But I think the more individuals
Definitely.
in groups of men that can take accountability for it and spread the message and learn skills, then the more we can address it. But yeah, there's definitely no one way to solve it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and as you say, like, yeah, talking may not be the complete solution, but it's definitely half the battle sometimes. And you hear these, celebrities come out with it years down the line, and they said, "I wish I'd spoken earlier about it." And yeah, just holding that space sometimes can be enough for someone, and it's getting more comfortable at doing that. You don't have to provide the answers, and that's a big thing. I think people are so scared to want to talk to their friends and stuff sometimes because although they know they may be struggling, they also know they don't have the answers. But that's not what people are looking for when they kind of seek help or they seek support from their friends. They just need someone to know that they're listening. And I work on Shout, which is I volunteer for Shout, which is the text line, the text crisis line, and that's the whole premise. There is that you're not there to solve their problems. You're there just to be like a voice, to be a sounding board, and just to guide them through kind of what they're feeling and thinking. And I've had so many people, even if I haven't necessarily given them something tangible to walk away with, they'll just say like, "Thank you so much for listening," because they know that maybe no one else has before, and so now they feel heard. Now they feel, they don't want to, without jumping to the kind of conclusions, but they don't necessarily want to think about suicide. They know that someone does care, and that's sometimes so important. So yeah, I definitely think it's just being able to hold that space, as you said.
And how did you get involved in that?
Shout.
Yeah, yeah.
So I just thought I've constantly wanted to improve and get a better understanding of all things mental health. And so I thought, well, what's something I can do with my time that doesn't take up too much time, but it's going to teach me like another way of talking about it. And so I decided to sign up to it, and it was like I think it's a 6-week training course, and then you just volunteer 2 to 4 hours a week, or you can do more if you want. And it's weirdly something that I quite like doing as a way to. It's definitely incredibly, if humbling is the right word, because you talk to people on there and you think you're going through a tough time, and then you get these people who are in seriously bad situations, and you obviously feel awful about it, and you want to do more. But as I said, our job isn't to cure them. It's not to stay online with them for hours and hours on end. It's just to kind of, their phrasing, to bring them from a hot space to a cool calm, and just to make sure that if they are feeling suicidal or whatever it may be, just to reassure them that you are there to listen, and that there are certain things they can be doing to help them. But yeah, I really like it, and I would highly recommend it to anyone who has a bit of spare time in the week and wants to help other people, because yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? It's about helping each other, because there's not enough support for people like them, which is why they turn to something like the text line.
Yeah, I'll definitely include it in the notes, and I'm going to check it out myself because I've been meaning to sign up for something like that, because I think it'd be really powerful to be able to do that. And I know they're always looking for volunteers. I know it's definitely an understaffed or an under represented workforce there for sure, especially with COVID knocking a lot of donations for those services. Um, in terms of
100%.
how I can see wearing a really nice t-shirt. So how does the clothing brand come into your journey? And love to hear the kind of the story arc of that, and where you're at today.
Sure. So I'll. It's a bit of a long one. So it all started with my younger brother. He was a very fashionable guy. He went to fashion college, had an amazing creative mind, and for his final project in his final year at college, he had to come up with an idea around fashion. So he decided to partner it with mental health, because obviously he was someone that struggled with mental illness, and he loved fashion. So he thought, how can I put the two together? And he created this incredible project that put the two together in order to encourage the conversations around mental health, to break down that stigma, and to create those safe and supportive spaces. Sorry. When he did it, it was an amazing project that got held back as like an exemplar for the college. He got praised for how good it was. It secured his place at university, and we were all blown away by the work he put into it. And we all said, one day you should take this on. You should make this a real business, or approach a charity with it. Like, I'm sure they'd love to see something like this. Following year, he passed away very sadly, and I remember quite quickly saying to my parents, "Look, he's got this project. It's now sat on a memory stick on a computer. We need to do something with this. Like, we can't just let this sit here and nothing happen from it, even if it's just a one-off charity event." And that's originally what I thought it would be. So, and at the same time, I wanted to quit my job. I was working in the city, wasn't really enjoying it. I needed something different. And he created the backbone. So I thought, fine, like, the backbone's there. I'm just going to throw myself into this and see where it goes. I believe in the purpose behind it. I believe that it can do well, and it might be quite a nice thing to kind of continue as a legacy for him. So threw everything into it, and at the end of last year, I launched it and decided to, really hone in on the whole thing of. So I created t-shirts and hoodies and sweatshirts, and worked with some of his mates to come up with a few more designs. And all of them have kind of implicit references back to mental health. So looking at the brand and looking at the t-shirt, you may not immediately think it's mental health related, but if you kind of dig a bit deeper and make your own interpretations of the designs, you can see that actually there's always a link there, which I quite like. And so it's kind of, as I said, it's up to your own interpretation. And created the website for it, the social media. And so I've been running it for about 8 months so far, and I've absolutely loved it. Obviously, it's been incredibly, up and down journey, very difficult at times, very stressful at times. And I am working in an industry that I've never worked in before. So, and all I had was kind of his project to go off of, like, particularly the fashion side. But I believe in the purpose so much and who I want and people that I'm helping that I can't really see a way of it not working. And I think obviously the fashion side is the important bit because it is a business, it's not a charity. And so we are, the clothing is the most important part. And this whole idea is that the clothes are meant to be a form of kind of protection, a form of armor, because we obviously wear clothes to feel good, to look good, but they're also something that we do take off eventually. And it's like, what's underneath? And so it's that whole idea of scratching beneath the surface. And that's what I want the sort of the brand to mean to people, to people to see it and think, I know that brand relates back to mental health. It's a case of being able to wear your armor when you want to and to protect yourself, but then to also spark a conversation between someone else potentially wearing it. And whether that's, on the street, online, whatever it might be, it's something that eventually I want, people to recognize the brand as that kind of conversation starter, as and when the customer or the person who notices it feels comfortable to do so. So you're not forcing it on anyone. Not saying there's anything wrong with them, but there are obviously slogans, tops with like slogans on them, and that's a little bit more explicit. I decided to go for the less explicit approach so that anyone wanting to talk about it can kind of choose as and when they do. And yeah, so it's been a bit of a journey, and I feel like I've barely got started, despite the fact that it's been working for nearly 2 years, and I'm so excited for what's to come. There's loads of stuff in the pipeline. I'd love to sort of start my own podcast with it. And we'll see where it goes. But I really do believe in it, and I think that's such an important part, is to believe in the purpose and to have that drive me every single day, knowing that I'm kind of providing towards something that's bigger than me, and that I'm supporting, the movement behind it, and anyone who's, needing support. That we're a brand that's there. We may be a clothing brand, but we're still there for support. We're still there for people to message into and stuff. So yeah, that's kind of the overview of it.
Yeah.
Sorry if it
So
dragged on.
no, it's a really inspiring story. There's so many businesses that are just created to just make a bit of money on the side and have no substance to it, but it's like such a genuine story and purpose behind it. And have you had many interactions with people that have bought and then messaged you to say, like, thank you for creating a brand that's supporting the space?
Absolutely. Had quite a few of those, and it's always really nice to see that. You get people who are genuinely so passionate about what you're doing, and whether it's because they themselves are dealing with their own things, or just because they want to just tell you, what you're doing is amazing. And so yeah, I've had that quite a few times, which is always lovely to see. And I want to continue doing that. And I think there's, I see lots of kind of videos and content out there of people, talking about how there's a lack of support and that they're really struggling and stuff. And I literally want to go up to, like, drag them into, like, our space and be like, look, we can do this. There can be a support network there. But obviously these things take time to build. But the kind of the really loyal customers, and the ones, or even just the people who follow the brand and love everything that we do, they're the ones that sort of drive it, because I wake up and I see a message like that, and it just spurs me on, and to know that I'm actually genuinely helping someone is really nice to do. But as I said, you're always kind of striving to be better and bigger and want to do more and help more people. So we're still very much at the beginning of this journey, and we've got a long way to go. but in the mental health space, you kind of all want to support each other. So even if you're competing to an extent in terms of the products you might sell, I've spoken with other brands and stuff, and we do try link up a bit and try help each other out, because we're all fighting for the same kind of cause. We're all part of the same system, and we want to help people as much as possible. So yeah, definitely, it's really nice to kind of be creating that community.
Yeah, well, let me know if I can help in any way. I definitely will, and maybe I can come on your podcast when you get around.
Yeah, definitely, you'll be first guest.
Why would you do that? So the way I like to finish is basically just to give someone a practical piece of advice, whether it's like a challenge for the next week. What should people do to try and improve their mental health, or their state?
So I don't know if this is too kind of broad, but I live my life with an acronym called HEADS, so HEDS, and health, so that's your physical and your mental health, everything is underpinned by three pillars, which is your sleep, your exercise, and your diet. Now, I know those three are all quite big things to take on. So even if it's just one of them that you want to work on, I think they give a really good grounding for you to be in a good mental place, because they've all been proven that if you neglect them, they can really affect your mental health. But if they're all in a good place, then it's harder for you to be kind of pushed too far one way. So and for me, that goes back to having like a good routine. So as much as you can, just try and even if it's just like a bit of exercise every day, it doesn't have to be heavy, 20 minutes, whatever it might be. And as long as you're getting, the minimum of 7 hours and trying to maintain a reasonably healthy diet, there's nothing wrong with every so often, not eating healthily, or we're all going to have bad night's sleeps, or not exercise. But if you can try and kind of create a little bit of a balance amongst those three things, then I think you've got quite a good starting point. And just work on them one by one if you need to, because once one is in place and you've got a habit and you enjoy it and you've reaped the benefits from it, then the others will fall into place more easily. So yeah, that's just something that I live by, that I think has always stood the test of time.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you very much. Cheers for coming on.